Yggdrasil is the world tree in Norse mythology, a giant evergreen ash tree that connects and sustains all the realms of the cosmos. Its roots and branches reach out to distant places and touch each of the 9 worlds. Today, we will delve into Asgard, the majestic home of the Aesir gods. As I begin this series, I will show you the stories and mysteries of the 9 worlds of Norse mythology. Origins of Asgard. Asgard is one of the 9 worlds in Norse mythology and represents the home of the Aesir gods, one of the 2 main groups of gods, the other being the Vanir. Although Asgard is primarily the home of the Aesir, it was not always peaceful among the gods. There was a war between the Aesir and the Vanir. This we will see when we get to Vanaheim. The creation of Asgard, as well as that of other worlds, is related to the act of creation that gave birth to the Norse universe. According to the sources, in the beginning there was only the primordial chaos, the void of Ginnungagap, and 2 opposing realms, Niflheim, of cold and fog, and Muspelheim, of fire and heat. From their encounter arose Ymir, the first giant, and Audumla, the cosmic cow. From Ymir and his descendants the first beings were formed, and from him himself, after being slain by Odin and his brothers Vili and Vi, the world, including Asgard, was created. Structure and locations. Asgard is composed of kingdoms with palaces and halls, each belonging to a particular god. Gladsheim is one of the most important realms, and is where the main god, Odin, resides. This kingdom stands out for having 2 of the most emblematic halls. Valhalla, for example, is the famous Hall of Odin. It is perhaps the most famous hall in Asgard. It is here that the bravest warriors, fallen in battle, are taken by the Valkyries after their death. It is said that they prepare in Valhalla for Ragnarok, the final battle. During the day, they train and fight each other, and at night they heal and feast with Odin. Valaskjalf is the other special hall belonging to Odin. In this hall is his throne, Hlidskjalf. From this throne, he has the ability to observe all the kingdoms and be aware of every event that happens in them. On the throne, Odin achieves Sidr, a type of magic that grants him omniscience. Valhalla is not the only place where fallen warriors reside. Freyja is a Vanir goddess who resides in Asgard. It is said that she chooses half of the fallen in battle, while Odin receives the other half in Valhalla. Folkvangr is described as a vast field where Freyja receives her guests. Located within Folkvangr, we find Sessrumnir, Freyja's hall. In Asgard, we can also find the Rainbow Bridge that connects with Midgard, the human world. Himinbjorg is the home of Heimdall, the guardian of the bridge. It is located on the edge of Asgard, which translates as Heavenly Mountains. From here, Heimdall can drink his mead and keep watch, for he has the keenest vision and hearing of all the gods. He keeps watch waiting to blow his horn, Jallarhorn, when the forces of chaos approach and Ragnarok begins. Thrudheim is another of the kingdoms, and Bilskirnir is his palace. According to mythology, contains 540 rooms and is the largest building in existence. This is the place where Thor resides with his family. Vingolf is the hall where the goddesses reside. It is described as a beautiful and peaceful place, suitable for the female divinities of Asgard. Stories associated with Asgard. Numerous sagas and myths take place in Asgard or involve its inhabitants, such as the theft of Sif's hair. In the vast realm of Asgard, home to gods and goddesses, a scandal broke out that would affect peace among the deities and require cunning and wit to correct. At the center of this story is Loki, the cunning and often mischievous god of deception. One day, driven by his playful and mischievous nature, Loki decided to play a prank on Thor, the mighty god of thunder. While Sif, Thor's beautiful wife, slept soundly, Loki crept in and cut off her splendid golden hair, which was her greatest pride and the envy of all the goddesses in Asgard. Upon awakening, Sif was devastated to discover that her beautiful hair was gone. When Thor saw the state his wife was in, his fury knew no bounds. Loki, knowing Thor's temperament and understanding the consequences of his actions, found himself in a desperate situation.
Loki! Turn off the Tesseract or I'll destroy it!
You can't! There is no stopping it. There is only the war.
Thor caught Loki and demanded a solution. The wily god, ever quick, promised that he would return to Sif even more beautiful and magical hair than the one he had taken from her. To fulfill his promise, Loki knew he needed the help of the most skilled craftsmen of the 9 worlds, the dwarves of Svartalfheim. he traveled to this dark and mysterious realm, home to the dwarves, who were known for their skill in forging and magic. Loki, with his characteristic cunning, made a wager with two groups of dwarves, the sons of Ivaldi and the brothers Brock and Sindri. He challenged them to produce gifts more wondrous than those of the other group, promising their heads if they failed. The dwarves, never shying away from a challenge and also wishing to see Loki humiliated, accepted. They worked tirelessly at their forges, producing wonders: the golden boar Gullinbursti, the gold-dripping Draupnir ring, and, most important to Loki, a golden scalp for Sif that would grow on her head as if it were her own hair. But Loki's machinations did not end there. To make sure he won the bet, he tried to sabotage the work of the Brock brothers and Sindri. Despite his attempts, however, the brothers produced equally magnificent gifts, including Thor's hammer Mjolnir. When Loki returned to Asgard with the gifts, including the beautiful hair for Sif, there was a great celebration. Sif, with her new golden hair which shone even more radiantly than before, was the center of attention. But the story did not end there, for Loki had to face the consequences of his wager with the dwarves, which led to more adventures and mischief. Loki's act, although initially malicious, resulted in the acquisition of some of the gods' most prized items. Another famous tale is that of the building of the walls of Asgard. Asgard faced an unprecedented threat. Its defenses, though majestic, were fragile in the face of the dangers of the cosmos. The need for a sturdy fortress was evident, and so began one of the best-known stories of the Norse pantheon. One day, an unknown builder appeared before the gods, offering to build a wall around Asgard, a fortress so impregnable that even the mightiest giants of Jotunheim could not penetrate it. But his price was not in gold or silver. He wanted the beautiful goddess Freya as his wife, and in addition, the bright sun and radiant moon to light his way. The gods, led by Odin, were perplexed. On the one hand, they longed for the security the builder promised, but the price was exorbitant. After long deliberations, they devised a plan, largely influenced by the ingenious Loki. They would accept the builder's offer, but on one condition: he must complete the wall in a single winter, without the help of any other man. If even one stone was out of place when the first day of spring arrived, he would receive nothing. Confident, but with a condition of his own, the builder asked that he be allowed to use his faithful steed, Svartalfheim, to assist in the task. After another consultation, and again influenced by Loki, who claimed to have a plan, the gods agreed. Construction began, and to the growing horror of the gods, the builder and Svartalfheim worked at an unimaginable pace. Stones were being laid rapidly, and the fortress rose higher every day. With spring fast approaching, the gods, fearing to lose Freya and the stars, turned to Loki, demanding a solution. Loki, ever cunning, had a plan. One night, while the builder and Svartalfheim were carrying stones, a beautiful mare came out of the forest, distracting the steed. It was Loki, who had transformed himself to seduce Svartalfheim away from his task. The distraction worked, and without his steed, the builder could not complete the wall in time. When spring came, a single stone was out of place. The gods rejoiced, and holding up their end of the bargain, denied the builder his reward. Enraged, the builder revealed his true form, that of a giant, and prepared to face the gods. But Thor, the god of thunder, intervened and ended the conflict with a mighty blow from his hammer. Asgard now had a new fortress, and Loki's cunning had once again saved the day. However, as always in the stories of the gods, actions had consequences, and Loki's antics would lead to even greater and more dangerous adventures in the future, such as the death of Baldor. In Asgard, the presence of Baldor, the most beautiful and benevolent god, shone. His light was not only a physical manifestation, but also a glow that emanated from his spirit and enchanted all who crossed his path. To many, Baldor was the very embodiment of all that was pure and good in the Nine Realms. However, with beauty and goodness often comes envy and fear. Baldor began to have dark and disturbing dreams about his own death. These dreams were so vivid and recurring that they deeply disturbed the gods. Frigg, his devoted mother, and the queen of Asgard, decided to take action. She set out on a journey throughout the cosmos, demanding that every being, stone, metal, and element, swear not to harm her beloved son. All agreed, recognizing Baldur's harmlessness, except for the mistletoe, which Frigg overlooked as too young and insignificant to swear. Meanwhile, Loki, the trickster, watched with his usual cunning. He saw an opportunity and began to hatch one of his most malicious plans. He discovered Baldur's one weak spot, mistletoe. He created a sharp dart made of this plant and bided his time. One day, at a meeting of gods, they began to play a game that demonstrated Baldur's invulnerability. They threw objects and weapons at him, all of which deflected harmlessly, unable to hurt him. Loki, taking advantage of the occasion, sneaked up on Hoder, Baldur's blind brother, and offered him a part in the game. He gave him the mistletoe dart and guided him in throwing it. The dart, driven with precision, pierced Baldur's heart, and the luminous god fell dead on the spot. A deafening silence fell over Asgard. The joy and radiance that once filled the realm was darkened by Baldur's tragic death. Despair gripped the gods, and though they attempted to rescue him from the realm of the dead, circumstances and Loki's tricks prevented them from doing so. Baldur would remain in Hel until after Ragnarok. Baldur's death was not simply the loss of a beloved god, it was the first and most painful harbinger of Ragnarok, the end of the world, where the gods would face the giants in a final battle. With the fall of Baldur, the foundations of Asgard shook, and the fate of the gods was irrevocably sealed. The final fate of Asgard is revealed in the prophecy of Ragnarok, the destruction and renewal of the world. According to this prophecy, Asgard will be overrun, and many gods, including Odin and Thor, will meet their end. However, after Ragnarok, it is predicted that a new world will be reborn from the ashes of the old, and some gods will survive or be reborn. Vanaheim. Vanaheim is the home of the Vanir, one of the two main families of gods, famous among other things for the great war of the gods between the Aesir and the Vanir, as we will see later. Although there is much information about the Aesir residing in Asgard, there are fewer specific details about Vanaheim and the Vanir in the traditional sources. However, what is known is essential to understanding the dynamics of Norse mythology. The Vanir are gods associated primarily with fertility, prosperity, the sea, and other aspects of nature and wealth. Some of the best-known Vanir include Njord and his children, Freyr and Freyja. Since the Vanir are gods of fertility, nature, and the sea, it is logical to assume that Vanaheim is a realm of abundant natural beauty, fertile fields, dense forests, and extensive coastlines. The seasons may play an important role in the kingdom's life cycle, with rituals and festivals celebrating seasonal changes and the bounty of the land. While the exact architecture of Vanaheim is not described in detail, it likely reflects a harmony with nature. Dwellings and structures could be constructed of natural materials and designed to blend in with the surrounding landscape. Although the Vanir are primarily known for their relationship with the Aesir, it is likely that Vanaheim had interactions with other worlds, such as Alfheim, home of the Light Elves, and perhaps even Midgard. Trade, cultural exchange, and expeditions could be common activities. It is important to mention that the Eddas and other sources of Norse mythology do not provide an exhaustive description of Vanaheim, and much of what we can imagine about this realm comes from fragmentary pieces and the contextual relationship with other aspects of mythology. One thing that is certain is that there was a war between the two families of gods. The war between the Aesir and the Vanir. In early times, long before Ragnarok was prophesied, a conflict arose between the Aesir and the Vanir. The precise reasons for this conflict vary according to the sources, but the clash is clear. This war is unique in that it is not gods against giants, but gods against other gods. The Aesir, based in Asgard, were gods associated with war and power. Their ranks included deities such as Odin, Thor, and Frigg. On the other hand, the Vanir, originating in Vanaheim, were more associated with fertility, prosperity, and magic. Njord and his children, Freyr and Freyja, were prominent among them. The spark that ignited the war was an act of mistrust. The Aesir brought to Asgard a Vanir seer named Gullveig. Fascinated and fearful of her sorcery power and obsession with wealth, the Aesir tried to kill her 3 times, but she was reborn after each attempt. This act of violence against the sorceress led to a direct confrontation between the Aesir and the Vanir. The battles that followed were intense, and neither side managed to gain a decisive advantage. The Vanir, with their mastery of magic and connection to nature, were formidable opponents. On the other hand, the Aesir, with their strength and combat skills, did not give ground easily either. The war reached a stalemate. with both sides exhausted and recognizing that complete annihilation of one by the other would be impossible. Instead of continuing an endless struggle, the gods sought a peaceful solution. They decided to seal a truce by spitting into a large cauldron. From this symbolic union and their combined saliva, a being named Kvasir was born. He would be the wisest of all, a living emblem of their pact of peace. To further solidify this truce, the two groups of gods exchanged hostages. The Vanir sent Njord and his children, Freyr and Freyja, to live among the Aesir. In return, the Aesir sent Hoenir, a god of high rank, and Mimir, famous for his wisdom. However, the Vanir soon felt cheated with Hoenir, as he seemed indecisive and a bad leader when Mimir was not at his side to give him advice. In retaliation, they beheaded Mimir and sent his head back to Asgard. Odin, however, performed magic to preserve Mimir's head, which continued to bestow advice. In time, tensions eased. The Aesir and Vanir learned to coexist harmoniously in Asgard. The adopted Vanir gods, especially Freyr and Freyja, became central figures in the Norse pantheon. This union of the two divine factions symbolized the idea that cooperation and mutual understanding can overcome even the deepest rivalries. The war between the Aesir and the Vanir and the subsequent peace reminds us that even the gods are not exempt from conflict and reconciliation. Although Vanaheim and the specific details of the Vanir are not extensively described in the preserved sources, their influence and the history of their interaction with the Aesir is central to the understanding of the Norse pantheon and the complexities of their divine relationships. Alfheim. Alfheim is one of the 9 worlds and is home to the light elves, beings who are often described as benevolent and related to light or beauty. Contrary to the dark elves of Svartalfheim, the light elves are viewed more positively in Norse lore. Although the elves are mentioned on several occasions in the sagas and the Eddas, specific information about Alfheim and the detailed activities of these beings is unfortunately limited in the sources that have survived to the present day. The story of how Freyr came to be the ruler of Alfheim is related to an Old Norse custom of giving a gift to the baby that gets its first tooth, an acknowledgement of the baby's transition to infancy. In the case of the gods, this rite was of much greater magnitude. When Freyr, the Vanir god of fertility and prosperity, showed his first tooth, it was an event of great joy. To celebrate, he was granted the kingdom of Alfheim, the home of the light elves. This gift was not only a symbolic gift, but also solidified Freyr's role as a deity linked to fertility, light, and life, aspects that are very much in tune with the attributes of the light elves. From that time on, Freyr was recognized as the ruler and protector of Alfheim and its elven inhabitants. Although no detailed descriptions of their appearance or daily activities are provided, the light elves are generally regarded as beings of great beauty and light. They can be compared, in some ways, to idealized versions of elves in other European traditions, where they are almost ethereal beings associated with magic, beauty, and nature. In some sagas and texts, it is suggested that elves, both light and dark, were the object of some form of veneration or ritual practices. For example, there are references to blot, or sacrifices, made to elves in some historical sources. This suggests that they had a place in the religious life of the Old Norse peoples, although the exact details of these practices and beliefs are, for the most part, lost to time. As lost as I am when I see that you don't leave me a comment or like my video before knowing Midgard, the world of humans. If you have come this far and you find it interesting, this is a good time to leave your comment and give me like. We continue. Midgard. Midgard, which in Old Norse means middle enclosure or middle world, is one of the 9 worlds and refers to the land inhabited by humans. Midgard is connected to Asgard, the world of the gods, by Bifrost, the Rainbow Bridge. The world also has connections to other realms, either through hidden paths, mystical rivers, or the roots of Yggdrasil, the world tree that connects all the worlds. Creation of Midgard. The history of Midgard is linked to the creation of the universe according to Norse mythology. In the beginning, only cold Niflheim and warm Muspelheim existed, separated by the void of Ginnungagap. From their interaction came Ymir, the first primordial giant, and Audumla, the cosmic cow. As Ymir slept, he sweated, and from his sweat more giants were born. Meanwhile, Audumla fed by licking blocks of salty ice, gradually revealing Buri, an ancestor of the gods. Buri had a son named Bor, who together with Bestla, daughter of a giant, had 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These 3 brothers, unhappy with the domination of the primordial giants, conspired and murdered Ymir. With Ymir's body, they created the world. His blood became oceans and lakes. His bones became mountains. His brain became clouds, and his skull became the sky, supported by 4 dwarves at each cardinal point. From his skin, they created the land, which is Midgard. The abyss surrounding Midgard was filled with Ymir's blood, creating an ocean. After forming the world from Ymir's body, Odin and his brothers found 2 logs on the beach, one of ash and one of elm. From them, they created the first humans. Odin gave them life and breath. Vili gave them mind and movement, and Ve gave them form, speech, hearing, and vision. Odin and his brothers realized the need to protect their most precious creation, humans. The newly created Midgard, the world of humans, was at the center of everything, exposed to influences and threats from other realms, especially Jotunheim, the land of the giants. These giants, often at odds with the gods, could pose a danger to humanity if they had free access to Midgard. So, to protect humans, the gods decided to create natural barriers around Midgard. The first and most obvious of these defenses was the vast ocean that surrounded the land. This was no ordinary ocean, for its vastness and strength would act as a shield against any unwanted intruders. But one ocean, vast as it was, would not be enough. The gods decided to add a second line of defense, one that would be both a barrier and a warning to those who would attempt to cross the ocean. Jormungandr, the world serpent. This colossal creature, thrown into the sea by Odin when he was younger, grew so large that he was able to encircle Midgard and bite his own tail. Its constant presence served as a reminder of the power and vigilance of the gods, and its size and ferocity would discourage any force that attempted to approach Midgard's shores. With these defenses in place, the gods watched with satisfaction as Midgard flourished under their protection. Although threats always lurked in the shadows and stories of conflicts and encounters between gods, giants, and humans were often repeated, the inhabitants of Midgard could rest assured that their world was well protected. Gods often visit or interact with humans, either to help, deceive, or test humanity. Midgard is also the setting of several epic sagas and poems, describing heroic deeds, tragedies, loves, and conflicts, such as the story of Thor and Hymir's fishing. The story begins with Thor, the god of thunder, visiting the abode of the giant Heimir. After a series of events demonstrating Thor's strength and appetite, the two decide to embark on a fishing trip. As they embark, Thor asks Heimir for fishing bait, but the giant tells him he must get it himself. So Thor goes to Hymir's pasture and kills one of his bulls, taking the animal's head as bait. Already in the water, Heimir captures 2 whales with ease, but Thor has a much bigger target in mind, Jormungandr, the giant serpent that surrounds Midgard. Without telling Heimir his plan, Thor casts his line into the deep sea, using the bull's head as bait. After a while, Thor feels a massive tug on his line. With his godlike strength, he begins to pull, and the resistance he feels is immense. It is Jormungandr, taking the bait and being lifted from the ocean floor. As Thor continues to pull at it, the serpent spews venom and fury, causing tremors and agitation in the sea. With each tug, the serpent comes closer and closer to the surface, and it is said that during this confrontation, Thor's eyes glowed with intense fire, and his feet pierced the bottom of the ship, seeking a better foothold on the seabed. As Jormungandr emerges, the situation becomes more dangerous. Hymir, terrified by the sight of the world serpent and fearing that its release may cause the end of the world, quickly cuts Thor's fishing line. Jormungandr, freed, returns to the depths, leaving Thor furious. He was so enraged at having missed the chance to capture the serpent that he strikes Hymir, throwing him into the water, and returns to Asgard on his own. The Icelandic sagas, while not always dealing directly with gods or mythical beings, take place in Midgard and reflect the life, culture, conflicts, and beliefs of the people who lived in the Viking Age. Although Midgard has its own defenses, it is not isolated. The gods frequently visit and sometimes even reside in Midgard. For example, Heimdall, the guardian of Bifrost, lived for a time as a human under the name Rig, creating the social classes of humanity. In some versions, it is Odin and not Heimdall who poses as Rig. Heimdall, known as the Shining Watcher of the Gods and Guardian of the Bifrost, decided one day to descend to Midgard to walk among humans. Adopting the name Rig, he wandered the earth in the guise of a man. As he traveled, he came to a humble hut, where he found two elders named Ai and Edda. Although their life was simple and their food was not delicious, they offered Rigger the best hospitality they could. He spent 3 nights with them, and in the 9th month, Edda gave birth to a boy. They named him Thrall. His appearance was rough and strong, destined to be a workman with calloused hands. From him would arise the Thrall class, the workers and servants of society. Rigger continued his journey and arrived at a house better built than the previous one. There he found Afi and Amma, a couple who lived off the land, but had more comforts than the former. Once again, Rigger spent 3 nights with them. 9 months later, Amma gave birth to a boy they named Karl. Karl would grow up strong and skilled, a farmer and craftsman. From him would arise the class of Karls, the farmers and free laborers of society. Finally, Rigger arrived at a large mansion where he stayed with Fadir and Modir, a couple of noble appearance and wealth. After spending 3 nights with them, a child with shining skin and glowing eyes was born, whom they named Jarl. This child was destined for greatness, to be a leader, a nobleman. From him would come the class of Jarls, nobility, and aristocracy. But Rigger had one more purpose with Jarl. He returned when Jarl was a young man and educated him in the arts of war, leadership, and magical runes. Jarl had many sons, but the most prominent of them all was Connor, who would be the first to be called Konungur, or king. Thus, through his journey and his actions, Heimdall established the social classes in Midgard, showing how the different classes have specific roles and purposes in society, and how these roles are, in some way, influenced by the divine. Like everything in Norse cosmology, Midgard has a prophesied destiny. During Ragnarok, the world is expected to be consumed by chaos and destruction. Before Ragnarok begins, the world will experience harsh winters called Fimbulwinter. During these winters, Midgard will face extreme cold, and the morality of mankind will decline. There will be conflicts. Brothers will fight against brothers and family ties will be broken. Jormungandr, the world serpent that surrounds Midgard, will stir in the ocean, causing huge waves to flood the land. This serpent will engage Thor in a deadly battle. Although Thor will succeed in killing Jormungandr, he will also be wounded by its venom and will walk only 9 steps before falling dead. With the Bifrost broken, the fire giants of Muspelheim, led by Surtur, will advance towards Midgard and the other realms. Surtur, with his flaming sword, will set fire to everything in his path, causing fires that will consume the entire world. After the battle and destruction, the world will be submerged in water, cleansing the land of all the destruction and chaos brought by Ragnarok. Svartalfheim. Svartalfheim, sometimes also called Nidavellir, is the realm of the Svartalfar, dark elves, and, in some interpretations, of the Dvergar, dwarves. These names and categories in different texts and translations can sometimes be intermingled, leading to some confusion as to whether they are distinct beings or simply different names for the same entities. Although the sources do not describe in detail the social structure of Svartalfheim, it is likely that they had a hierarchy or structure based on lineages, craft skills, and knowledge. The most talented or wise dwarves tended to occupy positions of leadership or respect. In legends, there are rivalries and competitions between different clans or groups of dwarves, especially when it comes to demonstrating their skill in forging. Svartalfheim is a vast subway realm, full of caverns, tunnels, and cities forged in darkness. Illumination came from luminescent ores, fiery forges, and magical gems. Its depths held countless mineral riches. Dwarves mined and used these resources, not only for their material value, but also for their magical and artistic properties. Dwarves are master craftsmen. Not only do they work with precious metals and stones, but they infuse magic and enchantment into their creations. The quality of their work is so renowned that even the gods often seek their skill. Despite residing in their own realm, dwarves have numerous interactions with the gods, whether forging objects for them or in wagers and deals. One of the best-known stories is Loki's wager with the dwarves Brakr and Sindri, as we saw in the world of Asgard. Another famous story is that of the Ring of Andvari. The Ring of Andvari. The Ring of Andvari is an integral part of Norse mythology, especially in connection with the saga of the Volsungs. I will try to bring the most famous sagas of the Nordic world, so I ask for your support. Comment if you want to see in the channel the Nordic sagas. Andvari was a dwarf who lived under a waterfall and had the ability to transform into a fish. He possessed a great treasure, and among that treasure was the Andvaranaut ring, which had the ability to produce more gold. One day, the god Loki, in one of his typical impulsive acts, kills Otter's son, who was in the form of an otter. Otter's brothers Fafnir and Regan capture Loki and demand compensation for their brother's death. The compensation they demand is that the otter's skin be filled with gold. To satisfy this demand, Loki captures Andvari in his fish form and demands all of his treasure. Reluctantly, Andvari surrenders his treasure, but tries to retain his precious ring, Andvaranaut. Loki, realizing this, demands the ring as well. Relinquishing the ring, Andvari curses it, declaring that it will bring misfortune and destruction to anyone who possesses it. Fafnir, blinded by greed and the desire to possess the treasure, betrays and kills his father Hreidmar, and then takes all the gold for himself. The curse of the ring begins to manifest, and Fafnir, increasingly paranoid and possessive, transforms into a dragon to protect his treasure. Regan, wanting the treasure for himself, tricks his ward Sigurd into killing Fafnir. After an epic battle, Sigurd kills the dragon and takes part of the treasure, including the cursed ring. Following the advice of some birds he had heard after consuming the dragon's blood, Sigurd kills Regan to prevent his betrayal. The curse of the ring continues to influence events, leading to betrayal, deceit, murder, and tragedy in the lives of those who come into contact with it. The Tyrfing sword. Tyrfing sword is another of the creations of these skilled and magical craftsmen. This is a magical and cursed sword that appears in several Norse sources, the saga of Hervarar being one of the most detailed texts. It all begins when a king named Svartalfheim, grandson of the god Odin, captures two dwarves. He holds them prisoner and orders them to forge a sword that never fails to strike, never rusts and cuts through iron and stone like cloth. The dwarves comply with his demand and create the sword Tyrfing, but in revenge for their captivity, they also place a curse on it. The sword must kill a man each time it is drawn, and will cause 3 great misfortunes. Moreover, the sword is destined to be Svartalfheim's undoing. As predicted, Tyrfing brings misfortune to Svartalfheim, who dies in a duel against a berserker named Arngrim. Arngrim takes the sword and later marries Eyfura, Svartalfheim's granddaughter. The sword then passes into the hands of Arngrim's descendants, leading to more misfortune and tragedy along the way, such as the confrontation between Heidrek and his brother Angantyr. Both brothers end up dead in the contest, and the sword is buried next to Angantyr. Later, Heidrek's daughter Hervor decides to claim the sword from her inheritance. Hervor visits Angantyr's grave and challenges the spirits of the dead to obtain Tyrfing. Eventually, she acquires the sword, which remains a central figure in the later events of the saga. Tyrfing's curse and its ability to bring tragedy to those who possess it makes it one of the most famous and feared swords in Norse mythology, created by the mighty dwarves of Svartalfheim, unique in the crafting of these legendary magical objects. Muspelheim. Muspelheim is one of the 2 original realms in Norse cosmology, with Niflheim being the other. Together, they represent the fundamental and opposing forces of the universe, fire and ice. While Niflheim is a place of cold and darkness, Muspelheim is a land of burning heat and eternal flames. It is in the Ginnungagap, the cosmic void between Muspelheim in the south and Niflheim in the north, that the sparks and heat of Muspelheim meet the cold ice of Niflheim. This encounter causes the ice to begin to melt, and from this process Ymir, the first giant, and the primordial cow, Audumbla, are born. The Muspelsmegir are igneous beings. Their essence is linked to the heat, flames, and brilliance of their home. Their creation is not detailed in the traditional sources, but it is understood that they originate from Muspelheim. They possess a special resistance and affinity to fire and heat, and are impressive-looking beings, reflecting the flames and energy of their realm. Surtur is described as a Jotun, giant, associated with fire. His very name, Surtur, means the black one, or the dark one in Old Norse, possibly referring to the smoky or fiery nature. Surtur is the guardian of Muspelheim, protecting its borders and ensuring that no unauthorized beings enter or leave the realm. Surtur possesses a great sword that burns with bright flames. According to the prophecies of Ragnarok and the Eddas, Surtur and the armies of Muspelheim will advance to the final battlefield called Vigridr. Surtur will face gods in combat. It is predicted that he will fight and ultimately kill Freyr, one of the most important Vanir gods, which is especially tragic since Freyr will have surrendered his own magical sword earlier and will be unarmed in front of Surtur during combat. With his flaming sword, Surtur will destroy the world with fire, engulfing the 9 worlds in flames. This act of destruction is also an act of purification, for, after Ragnarok, a new world will rise from the ashes of the old one. Muspelheim, with its fiery inhabitants and its imposing leader, represents a primordial force in Norse mythology. Niflheim. Niflheim, as described in the sources, is a place of extreme cold, with icy landscapes, dense mists, and darkness. It is inhospitable and represents the primordial forces of the Norse universe. The word Nifl in Old Norse can be translated as dark or misty. This reinforces the idea that Niflheim is a realm shrouded in mist and darkness, far from light and warmth. At the heart of Niflheim lies Hvergelmir, according to mythology, the icy vapors originating in Niflheim and the crackling flames of Muspelheim met in the Great Void, or Ginnungagap, that existed between them. Hvergelmir is the source of these icy rivers. When these cold vapors met the hot sparks of Muspelheim, they created the perfect condition for life to emerge, giving rise to the first living being, the giant Ymir. Hvergelmir is also home to Nidhogg, the dragon or serpent that gnaws at the roots of the world tree, Yggdrasil. This constant action of Nidhogg, along with other animals that also damage the tree, requires that Yggdrasil be continually cared for and tended by the Norns, the goddesses of destiny, to ensure its health and stability. Niflheim is essential. Its interaction with Muspelheim sets the conditions for the creation of the cosmos and the first beings. Although it is a place of cold and darkness, it is also central to the balance of the 9 worlds in Norse mythology. Over time, a part of Niflheim becomes associated with or transformed into Helheim, the realm of the dead ruled by Hel, the daughter of Loki. Although it can also be considered as a distinct realm, both places share similarities in their description and function. Helheim. Helheim stands out as the final destination of those who do not die in battle. It is the resting place for souls who are not taken by the Valkyries to Valhalla or Folkvanger. But unlike Christian conceptions of hell, Helheim is not necessarily a place of eternal torment. Helheim, often simply called Hel, is located in Niflheim. As we saw earlier, it is a cold and foggy region. While it is not a hell in the sense of punishment and torment, it is certainly a bleak and desolate place. Odin cast Hel into Niflheim and gave her authority over that world, so that she has to administer food and lodging to those who are sent to her. That is, those who die of sickness or old age. Hel, as the ruler of Helheim, is extremely relevant and mysterious in Norse mythology. Although many of the stories centered on the Aesir gods, such as Thor and Odin, are better known, Hel plays an important role in several sagas and is a pivotal character. Hel is one of the 3 children of Loki and the giantess Angrboda, her brothers being Fenrir, the giant wolf, and Jormungandr, the world serpent. The gods, fearing the destiny that the prophecies linked to these 3 beings, decided to banish or chain them to avoid future threats. In the case of Hel, she was sent to the world of Niflheim and given dominion over a large part of it, which has since been known as Helheim. Unlike Loki, who is often portrayed as malicious and deceitful, Hel is more of a neutral figure. While it is true that she rules the realm of the dead, she is not attributed with malice or cruelty. She is a ruler, and as such she abides by her own rules and decisions. She is just, but also unwavering in her decisions. Hel is described in a very peculiar way. Half of her body is said to be of a normal color, while the other half is completely pale or even bluish. This duality symbolizes her role between life and death. It is crucial to understand that, in Norse mythology, dying in battle is considered a great honor. Those who die fighting are chosen by the Valkyries and taken to Valhalla, the Hall of Odin, or Folkvanger, the field ruled by the goddess Freya. However, those who die of illness, old age, or non-combat related causes travel to Helheim. Despite its gloomy atmosphere, it is not a punishment in the traditional sense. It is simply a different resting place. For souls traveling to Helheim, the journey is not an easy one. One of the first challenges souls face on their way is the Gjöll River. This river acts as a barrier between the world of the living and the world of the dead, symbolizing a soul's final transition from earthly life to the afterlife. The only way to cross this river is across the Jalarbru, a bridge often described as glowing or covered in gold. This bridge is a spiritual journey that souls must undertake, leaving behind everything they once knew. Modgudr is the first defender the souls encounter. She guards the bridge, making sure that only souls that belong to Helheim cross it. Beyond the bridge, at the very gates of Helheim, the imposing dog Garm barks and roars at anyone who approaches. Often compared to Cerberus from Greek mythology, Garm serves a dual function, preventing souls from entering or leaving without permission. There are areas within Helheim that are even less welcoming. Nastrand is one such dreaded area, a beach covered in corpses and poisonous snakes, and it is here that murderers, traitors, and oathbreakers face the consequences of their deeds. The snakes spill their venom into a river that flows through Nastrand, and the damned are forced to wade through it as part of their punishment. During Ragnarok, it is said that Garm and Hel will lead the inhabitants of Helheim in battle against the gods. These inhabitants will include those who have led dishonorable lives, as well as the malevolent entities that reside in the realm of the dead. After the cataclysm of Ragnarok, when the 9 worlds face destruction and rebirth, Baldor and Hodr leave Helheim and return to the world, symbolizing a new era. Hel, as ruler of Helheim, has dominion over those who died of disease, old age, or any cause that was not honorable in the Norse context, such as dying in battle. When Ragnarok comes, he will release these souls, creating an army of the dead that will march against the gods. While these souls are not fallen warriors like those residing in Valhalla, their numbers are immense, and their very presence adds significant weight and magnitude to the conflict. Although Hel is a more passive figure compared to other active participants in Ragnarok, his alliance with entities such as Loki, Fenrir, and Jormungandr marks a joining of forces that have ancient enmities with the Aesir gods. Hel does not necessarily fight in the vanguard, but his support and deliverance of the army of the dead underscores his crucial role in the confrontation. Once the flames and chaos of Ragnarok have subsided, and the world emerges from the waters renewed, Hel's influence and dominion over souls is also transformed, with the resurrection of gods and the promise of a new beginning. Jotunheim is often described as a wild and rugged land, characterized by mountains, forests, and inhospitable areas. This realm contrasts with the majesty of Asgard, or the ordered structure of Midgard. Jotunheim is imagined as a vast expanse of untamed nature. High mountains, some with perpetually snow-capped peaks, dominate the landscape, interspersed with deep valleys where shadows seem to hold ancient secrets. Dense, dark forests stretch as far as the eye can see, hiding within them ancient creatures and magics. Rivers roar powerfully through this rugged terrain, rising from hidden springs and flowing into deep, cold lakes. But it is not just the landscape that makes Jotunheim a formidable place. The atmosphere is charged with a primordial magic, an energy that seems to resonate from the earth itself. It is a raw and potent magic, different from the refined magic of other realms, imbued with the pure essence of creation and chaos. Life in Jotunheim is a constant struggle. Here, nature is neither tamed nor cultivated. It is confronted and respected. Survival is for the strongest, and the giants, with their imposing size and unmatched strength, are truly the masters of this savage realm. The Jotnar are ancient beings, born from the union of the first giant, Ymir, and the progeny created from his body. The relationship between the Jotnar and the gods is one of the most intriguing and complex facets of Norse mythology. Although they can be considered antagonists in many myths and sagas, it is not a strict division of good versus evil. It is more nuanced and intertwined. The Jotnar are often seen as forces of chaos and destruction, in contrast to the Aesir and Vanir, who are seen as defenders of order and civilization. However, this dichotomy is not absolute. The Jotnar also represent fundamental aspects of nature, landscape, and primordial forces. They are not evil by nature. They simply act in accordance with their essential nature, which is often in conflict with the interests and desires of the gods. Despite their conflicts, the gods and giants are connected through bloodlines and marriages. These connections underscore the idea that order and chaos, civilization and wilderness are integrated parts of the cosmos and cannot exist without each other. Odin, the chief of the Aesir gods, is an example of this interconnectedness. His mother, Bestla, is a giantess, which means that the greatest god of Asgard has giant blood in his veins. This duality within Odin reflects the constant tension between order and chaos in the Norse cosmos. Thor, the god of thunder and protector of the gods and humanity against the giants, is another example of this complexity. Although he is often shown fighting the Jotnar, his own mother, Jord, is a giantess and personification of Earth. Thor's strength and power, therefore, comes not only from his divine lineage, but also from his giantess heritage. There are many examples of marriages and relationships between gods and giants. Freyr, another Vanir god and brother of Freyja, fell in love and eventually married Gerd, a beautiful giantess. The interaction between the Jotnar and the gods is not simply one of enemies in opposition, but a complex dance of relationships, alliances, conflicts, and reconciliations. In Jotunheim, there are many halls and fortresses, but few are as prominent as Thrymheim, which in Old Norse means House of Thunder. Thrymheim, a fortress located in the highest mountains of Jotunheim, was the home of the mighty giant Thiazi. Thiazi was no ordinary giant. He possessed great strength and cunning, and had the ability to transform himself into an eagle. In this form, he once played a crucial role in an episode in which he tricked Loki, taking him to heaven and forcing him to conspire against the gods to kidnap Idun and her apples of youth. However, Thiazi's actions would cost him dearly. Attempting to escape Asgard with Idun and the apples, he was pursued by the gods. Although he initially seemed to have the advantage thanks to his speed and his eagle form, an ingenious plan led to his end. The gods lit a great fire on the walls of Asgard, and when Thiazi in his eagle form approached, the flames reached his wings, causing him to fall. The gods did not take long to finish him off. After Thiazi's death, his daughter Skadi, armed and enraged, marched towards Asgard to avenge her father. Instead of combat, however, the gods offered reparations. They promised to make her laugh, something Loki accomplished with one of his pranks, and allowed her to choose a husband from among them, though she could only see her feet to make her choice. Skadi chose what she thought were the beautiful feet of Baldor, the most handsome god, but they turned out to be those of Njord, the god of the sea. The marriage between Skadi and Njord was complicated. While she loved the icy mountains, he preferred the coast and the sound of the sea. After trying to live in each other's domains, they decided to live apart. Skadi returned to Thrymheim, but with her marriage to Njord and her relationship with the gods, she became a goddess, associated with hunting, the mountains, and winter. Another legendary fortress is Utgard, perhaps the most famous fortress in Jotunheim. Located in the heart of Jotunheim lies Utgard, a fortress so vast and formidable that the very sight of it can intimidate anyone. This fortress is the domain of the cunning giant Utgard Loki, not to be confused with the Loki of Asgard, though they share a name and a talent for scheming. The most famous story associated with Utgard involves Thor and Loki, along with their two human companions. They traveled to Jotunheim with the goal of reaffirming Thor's reputation, which had been challenged by the prowess and trickery of the giants. After an arduous journey, the group finally arrived at a palace. Here they were greeted by Utgard Loki, who, after hearing their names and purposes, proposed a series of challenges to prove their worth. The challenges began with a seemingly simple race between Thialfi and a young man named Hugi. However, no matter how fast Thialfi was, Hugi was always ahead, proving to be uncatchable. Then Loki, proud of his ability to eat quickly, competed against Logi in a contest to see who could devour a row of meat in the shortest possible time. Although Loki ate quickly, Loki consumed not only the meat, but also the bones and the tray, besting the cheating god. Thor faced several challenges. First, he attempted to drink from a horn, whose contents seemed not to diminish no matter how much he drank. Next, he tried to lift a gray cat off the ground, but could only lift one of its legs. Finally, he challenged someone in Utgard Loki's court to a fight. He was introduced to an old woman, Ellie, who, to everyone's surprise, managed to bring Thor to his knees. After meeting the challenges, Thor and his companions left Utgard, carrying with them the weight of humiliation. But as they walked away, Utgard Loki revealed to them the true nature of their trials. Hugi, who was always ahead of them, was the representation of thought, immediate and unattainable. Logi, who devoured everything before Loki, was the embodiment of fire. The horn from which Thor tried to drink actually drained the ocean itself, Thor being responsible for the tides with every drink. The mysterious cat Thor tried to lift was actually Jormungandr, the serpent that embraces the entire world. And Ellie, who was able to subdue Thor, was the personification of old age, an adversary against whom even the gods cannot fight. With these revelations, Utgard Loki disappeared along with his fortress, leaving Thor and his company in the midst of an empty and deserted land. Another interesting story in these lands is that of the theft of Thor's hammer. One morning, Thor awoke to find that his prized hammer, Mjolnir, was missing. The hammer was not only an extension of his power, but also an essential tool for the defense of Asgard against the giants. The loss of Mjolnir left the gods in a vulnerable position. In desperation, Thor turned to Loki for help in discovering the whereabouts of Mjolnir. Using Freyja's magical cloak, which allowed him to shapeshift and fly, Loki traveled to Jotunheim to investigate. He soon discovered that Thrym, a mighty giant, had stolen the hammer and buried it in the earth, safe from the gods. When Loki asked him what he wanted in exchange for the hammer, Thrym revealed his price, Freyja's hand in marriage. Upon returning to Asgard with the news, Loki proposed a bold and comical plan. If Thrym wanted to marry Freyja, then they should give Freyja to him, or at least make him believe they did. Suggested by Loki, and in the face of Thor's initial reluctance, they decided to disguise Thor as the goddess of love and beauty, using a veil to cover his bearded face and giving him feminine jewelry and clothing. With Loki disguised as his maid of honor, the two traveled to Jotunheim for the marriage. Thrym, excited at the prospect of marrying Freyja, held a feast in honor of the wedding. During the dinner, the appetite of the bride aroused suspicion. Thor, still under his disguise, consumed an impressive amount of food and drink, which Loki quickly explained as Freyja's excitement and nervousness before the wedding. The climax came when Thrym, eager to give his betrothed a kiss, lifted the veil only to recoil before the fierce gaze of Thor's eyes. But before the giant could react, Mjolnir was brought in to bless the wedding, and as soon as Thor had his hammer in his hands, he unleashed his fury, putting an end to Thrym and the threat he posed to the gods. The Jotnar are beings of power, magic, and knowledge, and their relationship with the gods is complex. Some, like Aegir, are friendly to the gods, while others, like Thrym, are clearly adversarial. The story of Aegir's cauldron is one of adventure involving the gods Thor and Tyr. It all begins when the gods are enjoying a banquet in Aegir's hall. During the celebration, the Jotun of the sea mentions that he would like to offer a banquet to all the gods, but lacks a cauldron large enough to brew the ale necessary for such a feast. Hearing this, Tyr, one of the Aesir gods, remembers that the giant Hymir possesses a cauldron of adequate size for the task. So he and Thor decide to embark on a journey to Hymir's home to obtain the precious cauldron. Once they arrive at Hymir's abode, they encounter the giant's hospitality, but also his temperamental nature. During their stay, Thor is subjected to several tests by the giant. In one of these tests, Thor demonstrates his incredible strength by catching Midgard's serpent, Jormungandr, nearly pulling it out of the ocean, though he eventually escapes. After these events, Thor and Tyr reveal their true intention: to obtain the cauldron. Hymir, not quite willing to simply give it away, sets a condition. They will only take the cauldron if Thor is able to break a vessel the giant possesses, something no one has managed to do. After several failed attempts to break the vessel against hard objects, one of the women in Hymir's household gives Thor a piece of advice. He should try to break the vessel against Hymir's head, as it is the hardest material there. Following the advice, Thor throws the glass against the giant's head, and sure enough, the glass shatters. With the challenge overcome, Thor and Tyr take the cauldron and prepare to return to Asgard. However, Hymir and an army of giants oppose them. In the ensuing battle, Thor, with his mighty hammer Mjolnir, defeats the giants and secures possession of the cauldron. In the end, Aegir receives the cauldron and, with it, has the ability to offer a feast on a par with the gods, strengthening the friendship and bond between the Aesir and himself. More than mere antagonists, the Jotnar represent primordial forces, often associated with specific natural elements, such as mountains, storms, or seas. They possess an ancestral power, linked directly to the beginning of the cosmos, and magic that is often more raw and powerful than that of the gods. Moreover, their knowledge encompasses ancient secrets and mysteries that even the gods seek. With the onset of Ragnarok, the barriers between the 9 worlds begin to crumble, and the forces of chaos emerge with renewed fury. Jotunheim, which has always been in tension with Asgard, becomes the main bastion of these forces. The giants, beings of primordial and ancient power, gather under a single banner, ready for war. Led by charismatic and powerful figures such as Loki, the god of deception who has broken his ties with Asgard, and Fenrir, the monstrous wolf born of Loki, the giants become a formidable threat. Armed with rocks, mountains, and powerful spells, they march into battle, their fury fueled by old enmities and a desire for vengeance. The battlefield, Vigrid, stretches for 100 leagues in all directions. Here, the gods of Asgard, led by Odin and accompanied by brave human warriors from Valhalla, will face the overwhelming hordes of Jotunheim. This will be the last great battle.